The fog begins to clear as you step into the darkness of the rail yard. You peer into the mist and suddenly you see 3 boxcars. Oh man. Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm back with a video that I've been really excited to share with everyone for a couple of weeks. I created a new switchless building tool that I'm calling the OpsBuddy. Now the OpsBuddy is it's something that I developed. I was getting ready for my first operating session and I had a couple of the other switchless tools out there. I was working with those and trying to get them to work on my layout, and it just wasn't working the way I wanted it to. See, I've got a smaller layout, fewer industries. I'm modeling a quiet part of the country, so some of these industries might not get worked all the time. Some of them might get worked but get fewer cars in a particular operating session. And so I was having trouble getting that randomness out of those other tools. Those tools are great if you got larger layouts, if you want that automation. I think that those tools are awesome for that kind of thing. But with a smaller layout, every operating session I want it to be a little different. I want it to be a little unique. I want this layout to feel fresh every time that I pick up the throttle. And I just wasn't getting that out of those other tools. So I decided to build my own. Now the OpsBuddy is made up of a couple of parts. There's a roll table which kind of controls how an operating session is going to work out for you. And then there is the switchless building portion of the tool, which is it's built it's heavily inspired by a tool that Bill Neely made and talked about in the 2017 Model Railroad Planning magazine. He built his in Excel, and I just thought it was a really kind of a brilliant way of not only building the switch list itself, but also keeping track of where cars were on the layout. So I took what he did and then I changed it up, made it work for my model railroad. And that's what I'm sharing with everyone in this video. I'm going to leave a link to his original Excel file. It's actually been made available through trains.com, and you can download that if you have Excel and check out what he did, and maybe that'll give you some good inspiration as well. The changes I made for my layout I think work really well for me, and I think they also might work really well for you. So you'll be able to download the OpsBuddy for free. I'll have a link in the description below where you can get a hold of it. Check it out. If it works for you, great. Go ahead and use it. Make changes to it. Share with others if you think that they might like it as well. In this video, we're going to go through step by step everything you can do using the OpsBuddy tool. It'll be a longer video, so I'm going to include some chapter markers as well, so you can kind of skip around a little bit if you'd like. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right in. Before diving too deep into this tool, we're going to take a quick overview look at everything, just so you can kind of see what you get with OpsBuddy. Now, when you first click on that link, you're going to be taken here. This is a Google Sheets document. It's much like a Microsoft Excel document. It is free for you to take and use as you wish. All you really need is a Google email account. Now, before we get too deep, let's go ahead and take a look at what's involved with OpsBuddy. You'll see down at the bottom of the screen here, there is a tab with a number of, there's a bar with a number of tabs. This first tab here is the roll table. This is the brains of the OpsBuddy tool. Essentially, this will determine which industries will receive cars and which cars those industries will receive. There's a lot of customization, a lot of randomization available to you in this tab here. And this is really what makes, I think, in my opinion, OpsBuddy really sing, especially for smaller layouts. Just the ability to really fine tune and control the randomization of being able to build out an operating session. The next tab is the Switchlist Builder itself. This is what you'll actually build your switch lists from that have been sort of determined for you on the previous tab. On the left-hand side, you have all your staging cars. On the right-hand side, you have your locations on your layout where cars are currently sitting. And in the center, you have the actual switch list itself. And you'll be dragging and dropping cars from either the staging or in your on layout locations into the switch list, into the appropriate spot. And we'll go over that here very shortly. Once your switch list is built, it'll be ready for print, which is the third tab. This is just a well-organized tab that is basically ready to print, and doesn't contain anything else other than what's going to be printed out on a piece of paper to be used during your operating session. Instructions are in the fourth tab. We're going to basically go over almost all of everything that's in the instructions here today, but this is where you can, if you're finding yourself a little stuck or wanting to get a little bit of direction, you can come over here to the Instructions tab. The Car Inventory tab is where you're going to actually build out your list of all the cars that you own. This column over here, column I, the Switchlist Builder ID, is going to be the really important feature for this tool. This is what's going to end up identifying your cars for you in the Switchlist Builder tab. So you'll make an inventory of everything here, and then you can use that in the other tab. The final two tabs are kind of some extra things. When you're building your own switch list section out, you might find it just easier to start with a fresh new tab and start from scratch as opposed to actually trying to edit what I've placed in there. So these are just assets that I use to create this tab right here with the switch list and all the locations. I put the extra assets right here so you can copy and paste those, and that's just a little bit easier on you, I think, if you're building this for your layout. And then final tab is just a couple of examples of how to handle some additional types of switch lists. In this case, this is an interchange train that just comes from staging, stops at the interchange yard, drops off a bunch of cars, picks up a bunch of cards, and heads back to staging again. The switch list on the left is what I will use when I'm kind of running it by myself. I don't really need any additional information than what's right there. The switch list on the right gives some room to place some cards in here. So if I'm running with extra operators, I can use the switch list on the right to just give them a little more direction as to what to do when they are at the interchange yard itself. So with that, let's go ahead and build out a operating session using the OpsBuddy tool. Now, before we get into each of these features and start kind of going over how everything works, I thought it might be a good idea to go ahead and take a quick view of my model railroad so you can kind of see how it's laid out and you kind of get an understanding for yourself how I've got things set up in OpsBuddy so that as we go through the tool, you can see how you might be able to adjust it for yourself and so that it works good for you and your layout. Now, my layout is small. I've only got 5 industries. And it's pretty straightforward. The only real complication I have is I have 2 trains that I work in operating session. I have an interchange train, which brings cars out of staging and drops them off at Sandpoint, and then picks cars up from Sandpoint and then goes back into staging. And then a second train called the MFR Local, which picks those cars up that was just dropped off by the previous train and then works the industries up into Usk, Washington, and then takes all the cars back to the interchange where it drops them off for the next operating session, where the interchange train would then come back out of staging with a whole new set of cars, pick up these cars from the previous operating session and take them back. My 5 industries that I have, I'm modeling a small, short line in a quiet part of the country. So a number of these industries aren't necessarily going to be worked every single operating session. Pacific Steel Recycling gets cars maybe a third of the time. Some of these other industries get them maybe half of the time. And the idea there is just being, it helps to sort of vary the operating session. So it keeps them shorter for sure. But it also makes makes for a good deal of randomness between operating sessions. So I'm not getting bored working the same industries with the same number of cars over and over again. And I think having that control over the randomness is something that OpsBuddy does really well. So let's get into it. This first table here is called the roll table. And it is set up essentially like what an RPG, tabletop RPG game system would use as well. If you're familiar with like Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of thing, people who play that game will use a roll table to build unique characters for themselves with interesting character traits and maybe superpowers or that kind of thing. And they use a roll table to help kind of build that character. Works very similar in model railroading, except instead of building a character, we are building trains. So that's what we do here. This roll table has sections for each one of my industries, as well as some session modifiers, and we'll get into that here in a second. So we'll take a quick look at one of the industries, and then we will get into building out our first switch list here. So every industry starts with a question. Will this industry receive cars this session? No, the industry will not, or yes, the industry will receive cars. And each one of these questions has a set of numbers beside it. Now these numbers range from 1 to 20, and that is based on the D20 dice system, which is, again, it's a dice that tabletop role-playing game users will use when they're playing games. It's a 20-sided dice. But you don't need to use a D20. If you would prefer, if you have access to a couple of 6-sided dice, you could go on a 1 through 12 system, or you could use a random number generator and generate, numbers between 1 and 100. This is kind of up to you. I like rolling D20 dice, so I've set it on a D20 system. So there is a 1 in 13 chance. 1 out of 13, those numbers are assigned to no, the industry will not be worked. And 14 through 20, yes, the industry will be worked. So there's approximately a 2/3 chance that we're not going to work Pacific Steel and Recycling on a given operating session. But if by chance we roll 14 through 20 and we do get to work it this session, then we have some scenarios for what kind of cars this industry will receive. So we can really control how that industry has worked and how the car, what kind of cars might come to it at any given time. So there's 2 out of 20 chance we're going to get 1 gondola. You get a few more going down the list. There's a much greater chance that they'll receive 1 boxcar and 1 gondola. And then there's a 2 out of 20 chance as well that they will receive 2 boxcars and 1 gondola. So the more numbers you assign to a specific scenario, the more likely that will be the scenario that's chosen, right? That's just kind of how random numbers work, right? If you do select a boxcar, then you're going to roll again to determine which door that boxcar is going to go to, and that just adds another layer of randomness to it. So let's go ahead and start building out our first operating session here within the roll table. And to do this, I have a virtual D20 dice that I've pulled up here. Normally I print this out and I roll physical dice on a tabletop. That's just how I like to do it, but you can certainly do this virtually as well. For this demonstration, that's how we're going to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and roll my dice. And 15, I can take a look here on my roll table and I see 15. We are going to work the industry this session. So we're going to go ahead and put an X right here. Now we're going to roll again. 11. We are going to get 1 boxcar and 1 gondola. Okay, so we're going to put X there and we'll roll again. And 6, so the type of boxcar that is going to be a miscellaneous scrap boxcar that's going to be shipped out from Pacific Steel and Recycling this operating session. And we're going to get a gondola as well, which is nice. Let's go down here to Bell Lumber and Pole. This is a bit of a simpler industry. We get a 6. We're not going to work at this session, so we're going to go ahead and put an X there, and we'll skip the rest of this. We won't be doing any of that. Lehigh Cement. Let's see what we're going to get with Lehigh Cement. Let's roll here. 10. We are going to work this industry this session. All right. And let's see how many cars this industry is going to get. 20. Oh my gosh, we're going to get 5 cars this session. All right, next industry here. Ponderay newsprint 1. We are not going to work at this session. That's a bit of a surprise. There's a 1 out of 4 chance that you will not be working Ponderay cement or Ponderay newsprint this session. So normally this is worked, but according to this, we won't be working it at all this session. Huh, that's interesting. Let's go to Vegan Brothers Lumber Mill here, and let's roll to see if we're going to be working this session as well. 5. No, we will not be working this session. And because this is just a suggestion, this hasn't been determined by a computer at this point, I can adjust it from here. If I decide I really do want to work Ponderay cement, then I can just ignore that and roll again to see how many cars I'm going to be applying to that. Additionally, I have this kind of section down here at the bottom called session modifiers, where I can roll for a chance at modifying the session. So in this example, I have 1 through 7, no changes. 8 through 14, you get additional car, and I've called out which industries will get that additional car. 15 through 20, 2 additional cars, and I've called out which industries might get 2 additional cars. And this can add just a layer of complexity to it. If you have a full session, you might want to maybe add a couple more cars to that session. You can roll for something like this. If you have kind of interesting things that can creep up on your model railroad, say you have, you're modeling winter, and maybe you want a 1 in 20 chance that a heavy snow requires you to pull out your snow plow and get the snow off the tracks before you can get a chance to work the industries. You can add that to this. There's a whole bunch of different scenarios. Maybe your favorite, maybe your chosen locomotive is breaks down, and so you have to choose a different locomotive. You can set up the potential opportunity of that happening in an operating session. So there's a lot of randomness you can kind of build into a session using these session modifiers. Let's go ahead and roll and see what happens if we roll a session modifier here. I get a 5. So according to this, there are no changes. Okay. So with this in mind, we are ready to go ahead and start building our switch lists out. So in this tab along the bottom here, we have Switchlist Builder. Let's click on that. We can start building our first our switch list for our session. Now, this switch list that's in here is set up for the previous session. So what we need to do is we need to kind of clear everything out of the switch list and get ourselves ready for the next operating session that's going to occur. So that's what we'll do at this time. Let's take a quick tour before we do that. So over on the left-hand side here, we have our staging yard, and you can see all the cars that are in staging and available to go out onto the model railroad. In the middle here, we have the actual switch list itself. This is where you're going to be kind of placing cars. This is going to build out your instructions for the operating session. And on the right-hand side here, we have all of our on-layout car locations. So areas of the model railroad that are modeled on the layout. This is where all the cars are going to go for this. And if we scroll over to the right here, you can build out additional switch lists. So we have Sandpoint Turn here. This is if I want to build out a switch list for that interchange that I'm doing. I can do it in this section here. If you need multiple switch lists, say you have multiple trains working multiple different areas of a model railroad, you can build all that stuff out here as well. I've locked the staging to the left-hand side so that it's easy to kind of grab those cars and drag and drop them on these other switch lists that you build out here. But, as you kind of go through it, set it up for yourself, you'll decide what works for you. So, first, we got to kind of clear out the switch list, set it up as the layout looks currently before we can kind of build our next one. So let's go ahead and do that at this time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clear out Boyer Yard. This was cars that were picked up on the last operating session. They're no longer on the layout. So I'm going to move those into staging where they currently exist. In order to move things, I'm going to drag and drop them. So I'm going to select this first car here, which I have labeled as a bulkhead flat car. And I'm going to put my mouse at the top of that cell there. And I'm going to grab and I'm going to drag and drop that cell in staging under the heading bulkhead flat cars. So what I've done for myself in staging is I've separated everything out by car type, just kind of make it a little bit easier on myself, and helps kind of keep things a little more organized, right? All right, I've got a couple of a couple of paper box cars. So if I take a look over here, they've got a little section in staging for them over here. So I'm going to select those, drag and drop them right there. And I've got this box car here. I can drag and drop this into staging here. I got a number of cement hoppers. So I can grab these 3 here, drag and drop them right here. I got a cement hopper here, drag and drop it right here. And then I got a couple of center beam flat cars. So let's go ahead and add those to staging in this section right here. And now my interchange track is all cleared out, but I need to fill it up again because remember my layout ends at the interchange yard, which is called Boyer yard in my layout. So in the switch list that I built last session, I have this section here called pickup. These are all the cars that get picked up. So I'm going to go ahead and drag all the cars from the pickup box, drag them up into Boyer yard. There's these 3 here. Alrighty. And these 2 right here. Oop. Dragging and dropping can be a little bit fiddly, but you get used to it. It doesn't take very long. Drop those 2 right there. And then this off spot, if I take a look at what that is, that's a pickup or move. An off spot car will get, if the tracks are full, a car will go to the off spot until those tracks are open and available. So on the last session, I can see that I picked this up and I moved it from the off spot track and I moved it into my paper mill where it should go. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to take this and move it from the off spot into track 1 of the Ponderay newsprint paper mill. So I know that that car is where it's supposed to go, which is great. Now these set out cars can be placed where they're supposed to be going. So this gondola here, I have picked this one up, and so it's going into the yard spot where it belongs. The Lehigh Cement, all these cars were dropped off as well. So I'm going to drag and drop these where they currently exist, which is right here. And I have track 2, which is an off spot for the cement company. So this one goes right here into track 2. Ponderay newsprint, these cars were dropped off as well. So these are both paper box cars. So I'm going to put those on the tracks at my newsprint company. And this chlorine tank car was dropped off as well. So that goes on track 3. Bacon Brothers got a couple of center beam flats. They're going to go right here. All right. Now, if I take a look at my switch list, it is clean and clear, and all the cars are in their proper locations. Cars that are currently in staging are on my staging tracks. Cars that are currently in specific locations on the layout are in the specific locations there. And I'm ready to take everything that I applied on the previous table and apply them to my switch list here. So let's take a look. Pacific Steel and Recycling will be worked and will receive 1 box car and 1 gondola. So let's switch back over. So we're going to go into my box cars, and I can choose at random which box car I'm going to use for any particular industry. So I'm going to go ahead and just randomly choose this guy right here. We're going to drag and drop him. And if I remember correctly, it's going to go to door 1. Yes, it does. So I make sure that it's in the door 1 spot. Beautiful. And then I am going to pick a gondola as well. We'll just grab one at random, and that will go into the yard spot, which is really nice. Now, if there are any cars in these particular spots, they're going to get picked up. So I can see here I've already got a gondola in my yard spot at Pacific Steel and Recycling. So I'm going to go ahead and place this car. I'm going to drag and drop this one out of Pacific Steel and Recycling and put it in pickup. So I've set up my first industry. I have one car that I'm dropping off at door 1. Door 2 has a car that's occupied. We're not ready to pick that one up yet. And the yard spot at Pacific Steel and Recycling, I'm going to drop off a gondola and I'm going to pick a gondola up. Okay, and that is ready to go. It's just that easy. Let's go ahead and go over here to our roll table again. We'll take a look at our next industry in line, which is Bell Lumber and Pole. We won't be working that one this time. We'll take a look at Lehigh Cement though. We will be working it and we get 5 cars. Okay, so let's go over here to our Switchlist Builder again. And we'll go down here to Lehigh Cement. And we are going to pick up 5 cars at random. And I just kind of when I'm picking up random cars, I just kind of randomly selected them out of staging. And those 5 cars are ready to go. Now that means that these 5 cars here are going to be ready to go back. We have this additional car right here, which is an off spot. That's going to get set out as well. So we're going to grab these 5 cars and we're going to add them to our switch list, and we're going to add this one here as well because this one's going to get moved into track 1. All right, next we're going to take a look, and we are not working the newsprint this session, so we don't need to worry about that, and neither are we working the lumber mill. Okay, and there are no additional changes to our session. So here is a complete switch list, and that looks good to me. We got a lot of cars to pick up here at Boyer Yard and a couple of industries to work. It's going to be a smaller session. It's going to be a lighter session. It's going to be kind of fun to work that. So we are ready to go at this point. All right. So all we need to do is select this whole switch list. So I'm going to kind of click here. I'm going to shift select here. It's going to select the entire switch list. We're going to copy it, and we're going to go over here to ready for print, and then we're going to select our whole switch list and paste it, and now it is ready to print. So now we can go up here into print and print away. Now I did a few things to set up my prints to make them look a little bit nicer. Let's go over those at this point. First thing I do is I scale it to fit to height. That's because my switch list it's short enough that I can fit everything on one page comfortably, and it looks fine for me. If you have a very long switch list, you might want to add custom page breaks to that. We can go over here to custom page breaks, turn that on, click edit, and we can then begin to sort of move around where we want things to break. So it kind of breaks in a way that makes sense, right? Maybe we want to break it in such a way so that we put all the stuff for USC Washington, the same city, kind of goes on the same page. You can set that up and adjust it for however would work best for your layout. Again, mine is short enough that I can basically click fit to height and get everything kind of lined up here as well. Another thing I did to clean up pages a little bit, make them look a little bit nicer, was to go under formatting here and then clicking off the unchecking, I should say, the box for show grid lines. And that just kind of cleans up the print a little bit and makes it look a little bit nicer. And so that's how that works there. Another thing I've done is I've added a little box over here on the right hand side to add tips and tricks and stuff for my operators to use, stuff that they'll find interesting. Now, let's see. One other thing I didn't really talk about is how I sort of determined the cars, how I've sort of laid things out, things that I found that I think work a little better for me and might work for you as well. So I'm identifying my cars by their reporting marks, their road number, and the type of car they are. And I find from my layout, because most industries get a unique type of car, identifying cars by the type of car that they are works really well for me, right? Cement hoppers only go to the cement company. Center beam flat cars only go to the Vagan Brothers Lumber Mill. Bulkhead flat cars only go to Bell Lumber and Pole. So for me, that works pretty good. I've got a couple industries that receive box cars, and I just pull from the general box car pool for that. So that's how I've kind of laid things out here. Let's see what else. I've also laid things out in such a way so that dragging and dropping is pretty straightforward and easy. I'm not kind of scrolling up and down the panel every single time in order to sort of, try to find where cars are going in staging versus cars are going on the switch list. You'll notice that gondolas are up here at the top of staging because one of the first industries that I work, Pacific Steel and Recycling, they receive gondolas. So it makes sense to have that up top. Box cars are next because this industry also receives box cars. That makes sense there. Bulkhead flat cars, they go to Bell Lumber and Pole, so they're next in line. Cement hoppers go to Lehigh Cement, they're next in line, etc., etc. I also set up the car locations at the industries over here on the right-hand side so that it very much is in line with the switch list itself. These dark cells here are like spots where cars will not go. So, for example, on Ponderay newsprint here, there's 3 spots on track 1, so they get 3 out of the sort of 4 cells here are white, with the 4th cell being shaded dark. And then the track 2 is 2 spots, so there's no need to have a dark shaded cell there. And the dark shaded cells are also showing up over here on the switch list, just to indicate that there may be potential for me to receive 5 cars at Ponderay at Ponderay newsprint for track 1, but there's not 5 spots available at track 1. So those extra 2 cars that I might receive, depending on what the roll table gives me, those extra 2 cars would then end up going at the off spot at USC. So they would be set out there instead. So that is the switch list sort of in a nutshell there. We'll finish up today talking about how to customize OpsBuddy for your own model railroad. As I've said before, OpsBuddy is basically just a glorified spreadsheet. So there's no formulas or functions built into this thing that you need to worry about accidentally breaking if you were to make too many changes, that kind of thing. It's really pretty straightforward, and I think that works in its favor. So we'll start with just changing out logos. So if you are looking to print out a spreadsheet and you want to remove my logo, because it has nothing to do with your model railroad, you certainly can do that just by deleting that logo and then going to Insert Image in cell, and then browse to the location of the image that you would like to add in. That's pretty straightforward and simple. Editing any one of these cells is straightforward and simple. All you got to do is just click on the cell that contains the text that you want to edit. On these large black banners across the top here, it's actually the far left cell that contains the text, and then you can just change it to whatever you want it to be. So ABC lumber, and you can change any of these values that you want. When you click on the values, it's going to bring up a calendar just because it thinks 1-13 is January 13th, which is a little annoying, but you can just ignore that little calendar there and then type in whatever you want it to be in that field there, no problem. Let's see. If you want to add fields, you can do so by so let's say you want to add a row of below here, right? Just select one of the rows, select the number next to the entire row that kind of represents the entire row. Right click, and then you can insert a row above or below, and then you get an additional row. Same thing for columns. You can select a column, right click, insert column left or right, and you can get an additional column there to start adding content. If you want to adjust the size of column, just come up here to the top where the little letters or the numbers are, and you can adjust when your little arrow turns into, or your little cursor turns into an arrow, you can adjust columns that way. If you want to wrap text in a column, so if I shorten up this column here, I can see that this text right here kind of overlaps all the other columns. All you gotta do is just select the cell that it contains the text, and then make sure you click on text wrapping and make sure that this center one is clicked, and then boom, your text will wrap within the cell, and the cell will resize vertically to accommodate that new text. With the Switchlist Builder itself, it's a little more complicated than the roll table. So I would actually suggest you start with a brand new sheet and then copy and paste elements into that new sheet, as opposed to trying to make edits to this one. So if you hit this little plus sign right here at the bottom, you can add a new sheet, and then from there you can kind of copy and paste stuff into that new sheet. So I'm going to actually copy this first section here of the switch list and paste it into this new sheet. You can put it anywhere in the sheet you want. As long as you click one cell, it'll populate it based on the upper left being in that cell. So it'll paste it within the cell here. When you add it to a new sheet, you're going to want to adjust your column widths to make things work appropriately for what you're going to need for your model railroad. But then you can then continue from there. So if I wanted to add additional, so if I wanted, let's say I want to rename this spot. Instead of Boyer Yard, I want to call it ABC Lumber. I can do that there. We're not working at Sandpoint, we're working at Springfield. Right? If I want to add additional spots here, I can copy these cells and paste them below, and then turn that 2 into a 3. I can come over here to my Assets tab and select maybe this industry here kind of works for what I want. Let's go back to that original tab again and paste it in place, right? So now we have ABC Lumber and we have ABC Recycling. And I can always delete columns that don't make sense. If I delete stuff, it's going to clear the column, but it'll keep everything formatted the same. So I can remove formatting up here. So right here we have fill color. I can reset that to 0. I can also copy and paste from a cell that doesn't have any of that formatting, and that'll clear it that way as well. So there's a few different ways of doing different types of layout. This line you kind of see around everything, that is actually, if I go up here into borders and I click on this little outer borders box, and then I can choose the color and I can choose the line weight. That just kind of adds a border line around all the boxes that I have selected at that moment. So if you have familiarity with Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets, this can take a little bit of time, but in the end, it's pretty flexible. It's pretty easy to make those changes, and I think that's one of the great benefits of this program. One thing you'll notice with this, I've got this one large box that's kind of surrounded by all these other boxes or cells, and all this really is a group of cells that have been merged into one large cell. So if I were to select next to it these group of cells here, I can go to Formats, Merge Cells, and then Merge All, and it's going to merge all those cells into one box that I can then type whatever I want into. And then unmerging those cells is just a matter of going to Format, Merge Cells, Unmerge. I think that's about everything that you really need to see when it comes to customization. Let's see. There's a lot that can be done. The way I've set it up works for me. Certainly you can set it up however you feel works best for you. That's the whole point of this tool, is just to be something that's kind of a jumping off point so that you can make the changes that you'd like to see made and make it work for your own mono railroad. So if you made this far, hopefully that means you liked what you saw. I've worked my layout using OpsBuddy now 6 or 8 times, and I can tell you it's really quick and easy for me to build an operating session. It takes me less than 5 minutes, and I got something on the printer and ready to go. Each operating session has been unique and different from the previous one. It's kept my layout interesting. I'm not working the same thing over and over again, the same industries over and over again, making the same moves, that kind of thing. And I think that's really important on a smaller model railroad where you've only got a few industries. You don't want it to grow old. You don't want to feel like you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? You want each time to feel fresh and different and interesting. And I think OpsBuddy kind of goes a long way towards that end, making a railroad operate in that way. So, anyways, please do, if you're interested, download it, check it out, share it with others if you think others might like it as well, and let me know what you think. Thanks again for checking out this video. I'll see everyone in another one.